Hi, this tutorial will show you how to paint Starry Night. I'm using a 12 by 16 inch canvas for this painting, and I'm starting with the color Ultramarine Blue, and my brush size that I'm using is a 3/4 inch flat brush. I'm going to start by applying a wavy line on the bottom, and it's about 2 to 3 fingers high, and so I'm just going to connect that line with a pencil. This step wasn't shown in the step-by-step picture directions, so you can do that without drawing the pencil, but I found it a little easier when I recorded just to draw the line with the pencil so we know where the sky is and where the land is. Okay, so I'm going to start by applying the ultramarine blue to the canvas, and I'm going to apply a thin layer of this paint all throughout the canvas, and notice that I'm doing up and down strokes. Okay, so I'm using the full width of the brush and I'm doing up and down strokes of the ultramarine blue, and I'm keeping the layer of paint relatively thin, so you can see some of the canvas kind of showing through. You don't have to make it perfectly even throughout. You could have some streaks that are a little darker and lighter, and you can also apply a little bit of water to your brush and kind of swirl it into the paint to get it to be kind of thin so that it spreads faster. So this video is going to speed up just slightly here as I continue to paint the entire canvas, leaving the bottom part blank, so you can see that I'm not really making that wavy line apparent. I'm painting over it some. I'm just leaving a gap at the bottom, and that's okay that the bottom doesn't have that wavy line because we're going to go back over it and paint that line again. So it's just a reference line to kind of indicate that you don't have to paint the blue all the way to the bottom. You just leave a little bit of an open space at the bottom for where the land is going to be. And you can see that I dip the brush slightly in the water, and after I dip it in the water, I swirl it into the paint a bit. That helps to get the paint to be kind of even when you add a little bit of water to the acrylics, so that you don't get drips of water in areas of thick paint. You kind of get the consistency to be sort of the same. So I am just about finished applying this layer of paint to the canvas here. Adding more blue to my palette. You'll need a lot of ultramarine blue for this painting. And like I said, you really only need one coat here. I may go over some spots that are a little too thin just to kind of make it look just a tad more even, but I did say earlier that it doesn't really need to be perfectly even. Also, now would be the time to paint the sides. So if you want to do the sides of the painting, you can do that as well. I'm going to fill in this little bit of a gap up here that I think might be a little too high for a hill line. And like I said earlier, we're just leaving just a little bit of a gap on the bottom, and we'll go back in with green next to define where our land is. Okay. The next two colors you're going to load onto your palette are phthalo green and more of that ultramarine blue. So about equal amounts, a little bit more phthalo than the ultramarine blue, so maybe a 3-to-2 proportion. And I just use my brush to mix them together. So I'm using my 3/4 flat and I'm just mixing them, stirring the two together. And you want to make sure that there's no water on that brush, so dry it off all the way with your paper towel because we don't want to mix the water in with it. Okay, so I'm just going to swirl the two colors together and mix them so they're all blended together, and you'll get this kind of a dark teal color out of that. And I'm going to use the tip of my brush to redraw that wavy line. So remember, it was about 3 fingers high. So you may not see it anymore with the pencil, and that's okay. Just kind of redefine that line. And it's a wavy line. It should go over the blue a bit, and there should not be any white gaps left after you're done painting this wavy line. and I added a little bit more phthalo green in there because the proportion should be just a little bit more phthalo green than the ultramarine blue. Okay, and I'm doing adding a little more of the ultramarine blue in there, but there's still more phthalo, and I'm going to finish off this line and paint it in so it's a wavy line, and I'm using that tip of the brush to define that line. And we're not worried about the fact that there's other hills and stuff in this painting yet. We'll add those in just a little bit. This is just the one layer of the green land in this painting. And I'm double checking with my fingers on both sides to make sure that it's about 3 finger widths high. And then of course, if you're doing the side painting, you can paint the bottom part of the side of the canvas as well. The next thing we're going to do is make the color light blue. There's a lot of mixing colors on our palette in this painting. And to make the light blue, okay, so I'm done with 3/4 flat. To make the light blue, I'm going to add titanium white and ultramarine blue to my palette. It's about equal amounts, so about 50-50. I'm trying to remember what I said in the picture directions. I might have said a little bit more white than blue or vice versa, but the video shows that I did just about equal amounts there. And you should make a blue that is a light blue. So the blue should be, look how light it is compared to the ultramarine blue. And also I switched brushes, so I'm using a 12 bright brush, and I'm going to paint a hill over on the right side, pretty much using the tip of my brush to kind of define the shape of that hill. So that hill goes higher than the original green wavy line we did, and I'm guessing maybe 2 fingers high on the right, and then it just kind of goes down at a slant, sort of a wavy slant, and then at the bottom part, so kind of define the edge at the bottom. So we have our light blue hill, and we have our dark teal ground line. Okay, and then there's another hill that's going to be behind this hill, and this hill is going to be darker than that color. So I added ultramarine blue to my palette, and I'm mixing light blue with the ultramarine blue. And what's happening here, I didn't mix it all the way, so it's an uneven looking color on my canvas here, and looking back at it, I probably would have mixed it all the way. So I'm mixing light blue with ultramarine blue to make a color that it's essentially going to be lighter than the background because there's white in it. But I'm making a mountain line now, and this mountain line is going kind of behind the light blue line. So this is the furthest mountain in the painting, and it goes up higher than this light blue line over here. Okay, and then it got kind of messy right there. It looks like it blended together. I will go back and fix this in this painting, so just kind of bear with me right now. This is just a mountain line that's in this location, and I will go back and define that a little later here. Okay, because I kind of messed up right where that it blended with that light blue hill line, but it's okay. Acrylic's dry, and we can always go back and fix it. Okay, so we should have 3 levels of land now. We have the bottom dark teal line, we have the light blue hill, and then we have a sort of a medium color blue hill way in the distance. Okay, so we're done with our hills, and we're going to rinse our brush off all the way, and we're going to set it to the side and get a piece of chalk. And I'm going to use this chalk to draw spirals. These are the main spirals in the painting. So up here in the upper left, I'm going to estimate about 3 fingers down, and I'm going to start my spiral. Okay, this video is going in slow motion here, and I'm going to drag my spiral down and up and around. I'm about halfway across the canvas now, so it's a big spiral. It's taking up half the canvas here, and it's swirling around. Okay, so it's almost like the letter S, only the left part of the S we don't see. Okay, so this other spiral is connected. It's a little bit smaller, but it's connected. So I'm going to start right here, and it's almost like I'm making an S again. So I'm going to go up and around. The bottom part of the S is a little larger, and it curls back. So the size of this swirl is smaller than the first one, but look at the placement of it. It started like right in the middle of the canvas. Okay, and then this bottom is easy. I'm going to draw a line. That's not another mountain. It's a star line in the Starry Night painting. Actually, it's most likely where the light of the horizon is kind of showing where it's brighter. And so that's the line on the bottom where we're going to place some dashed lines of swirly Van Gogh style strokes. Okay, so that is the chalk drawing, and then we're going to continue on and paint over those spiral lines. And by the way, if you messed up, you can always get a wet paintbrush and lightly brush over your chalk lines and then dry it and then try again. We're going to grab our 12 bright brush and the color light blue. So the ultra mixed with the white, the same proportions that we did the light blue hill with. And I'm going to paint this swirl line that I drew with the chalk. It's going to be a thick line. I'm using the full width of the brush to make this line nice and thick. And over on the left side, this spiral is even thicker. So it's almost like it starts out thicker and gets thin. So I'll show you here in a second. I'm just going to paint this other spiral too. And remember, those spirals are connected. So I'm going to get them to be connected as well when I paint them over. And then I'm going to use the full width of the brush, making it go around. And then the nice thing about this bright brush is you can change the thickness of your strokes. So maybe some areas of that spiral, it shows up a little thicker, but you can make it thinner by twisting your brush on its side to create a thinner stroke. Okay. All I did was just follow my chalk lines and make the line thicker with the paint. And then, okay, over here on the left, that's what I was talking about. So it starts out thicker over here. So I'm making that line extra thick over here on the left, but then it thins out as it swirls. Okay. And you see some white strokes in there. It's because my blue and white aren't mixed all the way, so there's some streaks of white in there, and I'm okay with that. So if you want some streaks of white in there, then grab a little bit of white on your brush, and then you can do that too. So that's how I got the streaks of white, or you can just leave it consistent with the light blue. Okay, and this horizon line right above the mountains is actually not the horizon line, but just the light line that's above the mountains, doing the same thing. So I'm making that thicker, and it almost touches that swirl on the bottom swirl, but I think I left a little bit of a gap in there. Okay, and so I'm just filling that in nice and solid. My paint's kind of running dry here because I didn't want to mix another light blue in there, but I probably should have for demonstration purposes. Okay, we're done with the light blue for now, and we're going to make a light yellow next. So I'm using cad yellow medium and titanium white. A little bit less titanium white, probably 3-to-2 proportion, so 3 yellow to 2 white. Mix it together with your brush, and I'm using a number 6 round brush. And you can guess what we're doing next. We're going to paint the circles in the sky. There's a large circle for the moon, and there are kind of medium, small size circles for all the stars. Starting with this moon, I'm going to paint a circle. And I can't tell you exactly the diameter of this circle. I'm going to guess maybe 4 inches diameter, 4 to 5 inches. I'm not sure. But it is the largest circle in the sky, upper right hand corner. it's just the base circle for the moon. We'll go back later and paint the crescent shape over it. And it is a circle, so as circle as you can get here. I know that I never paint perfect circles and I'm just freehanding it, so it doesn't have to be perfect. The imperfections of it kind of give the painting character. Okay, and that's just with the yellow and the white. By the way, adding the white into the yellow is very important here because we have a dark background, and that yellow would not show up this bright unless we add that white in it. So that white is a kind of a critical thing to mix in with your yellow. Okay, and then for the smaller stars, I'm just doing the same thing with this round brush and just kind of starting out and swirling my paint to create a circle. Okay, and these are smaller circles. They should be smaller than that larger circle. They're not tiny, but they're still relatively small compared to the large circle. And then I'm kind of looking at the original as I'm doing this and kind of doing the stars in the same sort of placements that Van Gogh did, but it really doesn't have to be exact. If you want to put stars in different locations, you can. And actually, I found this out. I didn't know this about this painting, but he actually painted Venus as one of the stars. There's there's a large star in the painting that's on the bottom, above the light star line above the mountains, and that largest star is supposed to depict Venus. And I thought that was kind of cool because I always noticed that there was a larger star in the painting, but I didn't know that it was actually intended to be the morning star. So that was kind of a neat fact that I learned. Okay, we're going to start adding these dash lines here, and I'm going to twist my brush in my yellow here because I want to use the point of my brush to make a sort of thinner lines, and it might be hard to do with the 6 round. You might want to switch down to a smaller round if you're having trouble with that, but I went ahead and used the 6 round, and I'm doing dash lines with the yellow, and these are just little dash tick marks. I'm using the tip of my brush, maybe giving it a little bit of a pressure, starting out with light pressure and pushing down just a little bit harder and then letting go. But they're just basic tick marks, dash lines, and they are flowing and they're going across this bottom the bottom light blue area. So just in the light blue area is where I'm doing the yellow dash lines, and there it looks like there's about 3 rows of the color, 3 to 4 rows of that color. So that is the light that's shining over the mountains. And if you want to paint over some of those stroke lines, you may do so. Okay, and then we're going to take this concept of the yellow tick lines and we're going to add it to the other part of the spirals. And real quick, I'm making this bottom part kind of stick up a little bit. Okay, and then so over here where the light blue spirals are, I'm going to do the same thing, only they're going to flow in the direction of the spirals. So the same tick lines with my yellow brush, and this doing all these dash lines, yes, it may take a while. It may be a little time consuming. I find it extremely enjoyable and therapeutic to just paint these little dash lines because, you just keep working at it, keep adding the little dash lines, and your painting sort of evolves. And then there are dash lines around the moon. These dash lines are kind of light and feathery. So I'm kind of holding my brush a little bit lighter than the ones I did on the spirals, just to make them a little bit more wispy. I don't want to take over that blue. I still want to see that dark blue underneath, but those dash lines make it look like the moon is glowing. So we did the dash lines on the bottom part, the light above the mountain. We did the dash lines in the spirals and around the moon. We're going to do 1 row of dash lines around the stars. So doing the same thing, but just 1 row, kind of wispy with these lines. They're smaller and they go around each of the circles. And don't worry about having to sort of overlap your lines. So if your lines around the stars have to overlap the star next to it, that's okay. Or even if it has to go over part of that light blue spiral, that's okay. Okay, so I have one row of yellow dash lines that go around the circles. All right, I'm going to rinse all of that yellow off the brush, and I'm going to do blue dash lines next. Ultramarine blue dash lines next. And I'm going to add these ultramarine dash lines to the light blue spiral. Okay, and I'm going to kind of be careful because that yellow is not dry, and if the yellow and the blue mix, I'm going to get green in my sky, and I don't want green in my sky. So I'm doing these dash lines, and I'm going to try to be careful not to get too much yellow overlap there. If it overlaps a little, it should be fine. Okay, but I'm doing these dash lines kind of sparingly throughout this middle spiral. Okay, so we have dark blue dash lines and yellow dash lines on our light blue spiral now. Okay, and then I'm going to do the dark blue dash lines in this bottom spiral as well. Okay, so little tick marks of dash lines that go in the spiral. Okay, and then there are dark blue dash lines over here on the bottom part above the mountains. Okay, not very many, just a few here and there. Okay, because it's a bright part of the painting. If I add too much dark blue, it would kind of take away from it. And then while I'm using this dark blue, this is what I was talking about way earlier when I was doing the mountains, that I went back and kind of adjusted this. So I'm using just the ultramarine blue to redefine this mountain line here, to make sure that it is totally going over the star. So we don't want the dash lines to go over the mountains. We want the mountain to overlap here. Okay, so I'm defining my mountain line way in the back with the ultramarine blue. So earlier it was a lighter blue, but I'm just redefining it with just the ultramarine blue. Okay, so we have a definite part of the mountain, and we have the part of the sky, so that's defined. Okay, so next we're going to do ultramarine blue mixed with white, and essentially it's light blue, but we want to add just a little bit more white in there because we want this to show up against we want it to show up against that light blue swirl line. So this is I guess you can say it's light blue mixed with white to make a even lighter blue, so it shows up. But we are doing more dash lines on the spiral, so same thing, and it's okay if your dash lines are overlapping some other previous dash lines that are there. That's kind of the style and the intent of Impressionism. And so I'm going to just continue on with this light blue and add the little dash lines. I kind of emphasized a little bit more on the edges of that spiral. Okay, and I'm going to do this bottom spiral over here. And there's a lot of kind of expression in these lines. It might be a little hard for me to explain, but don't think of it as they're like stitch lines, because that's more geometric and precise. This is more you're expressing yourself. You're kind of putting emotion into your lines, and you're making them flow, and they're not exactly all the same consistencies, all the same length. There's more kind of emotion behind the line, if that makes sense. So just kind of don't think too hard about your lines, just put more feeling into it. And you saw me do the light blue lines on the bottom part too. Okay, and we're going to do more of those lines, but we're going to kind of fill in the gaps in the sky. So on my palette, I want a blue that is lighter than the sky. So it's like ultramarine blue mixed with light blue. And so we kind of have like a medium blue. And so you can see that the lines are light against that ultramarine blue, but they're not exactly like very noticeable, but they're there. It kind of creates the texture in the sky. And I'm going to fill in the rest of the gaps that I have with those same kind of lines, but I want to make sure that they're flowing around the shape. So if I'm by a circle, they should be flowing around the circle. And if I'm by the spiral, they should be flowing by the spiral. So they should be contouring with whatever shape they're sort of around. And that's what creates the illusion of the swirly sky that Van Gogh tried to depict. Not tried, he mastered it in his painting. I'm trying to depict what he did, and but you're making the direction go with the direction of the spirals in the sky, and filling up the gaps. But of course, there's a lot of ultramarine blue showing through, so we're not filling it in 100% solid with those lines. There's still a lot of the ultra showing through. Okay, moving right along, we're gonna do some tick marks on the mountains now. And this is light blue with white in it, so it's a lighter blue. And I'm going to do the same kind of impression lines, but these are going sort of diagonal, sort of vertical / diagonal. I guess they're technically going diagonally, but they are on the light blue mountain line. I'm using the 6 round brush and that light blue color. So it's the light blue mixed with white. And those are my impression lines on the mountain. And then I'm going to do the same kind of lines on the dark blue mountain on the top. And same color, same kind of lines. And these are also the impression lines. And because that part of the mountain is slimmer, my lines might be going a little bit more slanter to get it to fill in a little bit more. I didn't do it all the way across because I knew there was going to be that cypress tree in there, so I just kind of left the left part of my painting blank as far as the lines go. Okay, for the lines on the ground, I used phthalo green. And I mixed it with titanium white. So I mix the two together and it makes a sort of a minty looking color. So it's phthalo mixed with white, phthalo green mixed with white. And this ended up being a little bit too light. I'll show you what I mean. But I'm swirling my brush to get the tip of my brush for the point on that to get these lines to be thinner, because if I paint now it's going to be too thick. So I'm twisting my brush to get the paint just on the point of my brush. And then I'm doing the same kind of impressionism lines, but they're kind of they're going horizontal, but they're kind of arced a little bit. So kind of a texture bumpy looking line. And I'm doing that all throughout the bottom part of the land. And because it's a little bit too bright, I'm going to add more phthalo in there to get it to be just a tad darker in there. And then I'm going to continue on, and there you can see how I'm kind of leaving a gap. Actually, I'm just going to go fill this part in on the bottom. But don't worry about it. If you filled it all in, we can always wait for everything to dry and then do the cypress tree. Okay, so just continue in with the impressionism lines on the bottom part, all on the land, the bottom part of the land. In the original painting, there's a village. Van Gogh depicted a village in this painting, and I did not do the village. I simplified this a little bit. Okay. So I will say, when you're done with the land part, you will need to move on to the color cadmium orange medium, because hopefully that big yellow circle that you painted earlier for the moon has dried. So I'm loading CAD Yellow Medium onto my palette, and I'm still going to use that number 6 round brush to paint my crescent moon. Okay, so get all the water off, dry it off so it's not drippy, okay, and load it with the orange. And then, so when I do crescent moons, I always start by painting like a letter C and making sure that the tips of the moon kind of form the crescent shape, and so it gets kind of thicker in the middle and then it gets to a tip. Okay, so form your crescent moon shape, and then if you needed to, you could also, it might be too late now that I'm telling you this, you could draw your moon with a pencil lightly first, and then kind of when you feel confident with it, you can go back and paint it in. But if you mess up, you could always wait for that to dry and then go back with light yellow, and it should paint over the orange. Okay, so there's some wispy lines around that as well. So some light wispy orange lines, impression lines that go around the moon. Okay, and then in the center of all these stars there's a little orange dot. So I'm adding that to all of those circles, an orange dot. And then I'm going to add a very, very light wispy line around all the stars. And actually that line kind of goes over the yellow. And actually what I'm doing now is I'm going back over, making the little dot inside of the circle is just a tad bit bigger. So it's not a dot, it's more like a circle. Okay, a little circle. And then so the orange impression line kind of, it goes in the same area as that yellow line, but it doesn't completely cover it. So I still see the orange and the yellow. Okay. And then add a few more wispies over here on the moon. There's a little bit of orange line on the spirals. I didn't do too much because it would have been overpowering with orange, but just a few orange impression lines here and there just on the spiral. And I did not do it on the bottom part where the star line is above the mountain, but I guess you can add a little bit of orange in there. Okay, so the last step in this painting is the cypress tree, and I'm going to let my painting dry a bit. I'm actually going to rinse my water out here. That's what I'm doing as my painting is drying just a bit. I recommend getting a blow dryer or hair dryer and just getting it to be dry, because when you paint the cypress tree, you don't want the paint to mix in with the already colors on the painting, or you can take a long break and come back to it. Okay, for the cypress tree, you'll need Mars Black, and I'm going to use my 12 bright brush for this. Okay, and I did not draw the cypress tree with chalk. If you're not feeling very confident about it, you can always get a piece of chalk and draw your cypress tree. I'm looking at the original version right now as I'm painting this, and I'm looking at the shape of it, and it kind of it creates this sort of shape. So I'm using the tip of my brush to outline the shape of the cypress tree. It goes almost all the way to the top of the painting. There's the highest point, and then it kind of there's a couple more points on the right, and then it kind of goes down, and then there's a sort of a wavy sort of point on the right that kind of goes up, and it kind of curves down. Okay, so when you get the shape of your cypress tree in, then it's super easy. You can just fill it in solid with the Mars Black, and that's what I'm doing here, filling it in all the way with the Mars Black and with the 12 bright brush. I'm going to speed this video up just a tad bit here and go silent on you, but all I'm doing is filling in my shape. Okay, let's say that we want to see some texture on the cypress tree. Then I'm going to show you something. So I used cad orange medium, and the black of the cypress tree is still wet, so it's blending with the wet of the black. And so the black and orange is blending, and I'm using the tip of my 12 bright brush, and I'm using it to create some texture. So I'm painting some wavy lines, and those wavy lines are kind of blending in with the black as I brush over it, but it gives some indication that the cypress tree also has impression lines too. So everything, pretty much everything in this painting has the impression lines in it. And this is optional if you're doing it and you say, I don't like how that looks with the orange. You don't have to do that. You can just leave it solid black. Okay. And then finally, the very last thing I did in this painting was add a few lines that were behind the cypress tree on the left. I kind of left that blank because I wasn't sure where the cypress tree was going to be. So I just added just a few little bit of lines in there. Makes only a subtle difference in the overall painting. But this Starry Night painting tutorial has come to its conclusion. I hope that you found this helpful in learning how to paint hopefully an easy version of Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night. Thanks for watching.